She took nothing when she left. Not the cloak, not the ring, not even the letter she had carried unopened for 19 years, until she remembered, halfway down the frozen drive, that it was the only thing in that entire keep that had ever truly been hers. She turned back for it alone, in the dark, without a torch, and no one stopped her, because no one yet knew she was gone. Fenna Ashworth had been the Winterhold estate's keeper of the mews for 6 years. She fed the hunting birds before dawn, mended their jesses, and kept the ledger of which hawk had flown well and which had not. She did this because it needed doing, and because the birds did not care what she was, only that she came when she said she would. It was, she had long ago decided, an honest way to be needed. She did not expect to be seen. That was the arrangement she had made with the world, without ever writing it down. She would do good work quietly, and the world would leave her alone to do it. The estate did not know what to make of her when she had first been sent there, a girl handed over as part of a treaty she had not been old enough to understand, tucked into the household register under a designation that meant, roughly, without station. She had grown into the designation. She had grown around it, the way a young tree grows around an old nail. She was not thinking about any of that on the morning it started. She was thinking about the hawk. It had come to the mews 3 days before, injured and half-starved, driven down from the high crags by a storm it should not have survived. She had set the wing herself, without calling for the falconer, because the falconer was 3 miles off at the winter fair, and the bird would not have lasted the wait. She had fed it from her own hand, slowly, without gloves, because gloves made her clumsy, and the bird needed precision more than protection. She was doing that, kneeling in the cold straw with blood-warm meat between her fingers, murmuring nothing in particular to a bird that could not understand her, when she heard the door of the mews open behind her and did not turn around, because whoever it was, they were not here for her. You should not be doing that without gloves. The voice was not the falconer's. She looked up. The Alpha King of Winterhold stood in the doorway with the pale morning behind him, dressed for the cold in dark wool and a fur-lined mantle he had clearly thrown on without ceremony, and he was looking at her hands, not her face, with an expression she did not have a name for. She had seen him perhaps 4 times in 6 years, always at a distance, always from below on the dais at the winter feast, on horseback crossing the outer bailey. Once through a window she should not have been looking through. He had never looked at her hands before. She was fairly sure he had never looked at her at all. The gloves frighten it, she said, because it was true, and because she did not know what else a person said to a king who had wandered into a mews before breakfast. He came further in. The hawk did not startle, which she noted, distantly, as strange. It startled at everything, even the wind. "It's healing well," he said. It was not a question, but she answered it anyway. "The wing was clean," she said. "Another week, and it will fly again." He crouched, which surprised her more than anything he had said. Kings did not crouch in straw. He studied the bird with the particular attention of a man who had once known something about hunting birds and had not thought of it in a long time. "You set this yourself," he said. "There was no one else too," she said. "There is always someone else," he said, not unkindly. "You did not send for them." She did not have an answer for that, because the true answer, that she had never once, in 6 years, sent for anyone to do a thing she could do herself, because sending for someone meant being seen asking, was not a thing she had ever said aloud, even to herself. He left without further comment, the way he had come, and she told herself it meant nothing, and went back to the bird. He was in the doorway of the mews again the next morning, and the one after that. He did not command her. He did not explain himself. He simply appeared each dawn and crouched near the straw, and asked her things, how long she had kept the mews, why she had chosen falconry, whether the bird had a name yet, and she answered him plainly, the way she answered anyone, because performing deference to a man crouched in bird straw felt suddenly, absurdly, beside the point. 6 years, she told him, on the 4th morning, when he asked how long she had been at Winterhold at all. I did not know that, he said. Most people do not, she said. He did not say anything to that. He watched the hawk take meat from her fingers, and something in his jaw tightened in a way she could not read. And then he left, and she thought about it for the rest of the day, in a manner she did not entirely approve of. She did not know, because he did not tell her, that he had gone directly from the mews to the estate steward, and had her rotation quietly moved, so that her final feeding of the birds no longer ended after full dark. He told the steward it was an administrative correction, a matter of efficient scheduling. The steward, who had served 3 kings and knew better than to ask, wrote it into the roster and said nothing. She noticed only that she was walking back to the lower quarters in grey evening light instead of black night, for the first time in 6 years, and did not know why, and did not think to ask. The Lady Isabet Vray arrived at Winterhold 9 days later, with a retinue of 30, and a claim that predated Fenner's presence at the estate by a decade and a half. She had been promised to Roderick once, before he was king, before his father's death had put the mantle on him early and hard. The promise had been quietly allowed to lapse when the alliance it served no longer needed serving, and Isabet had gone north to her own family's holdings, and as far as anyone at Winterhold knew, made a life there. She had not, evidently, considered the matter closed. "You look well, Roderick," she said, in the great hall, in front enough witnesses that the greeting was itself a small act of war. "Winterhold suits you. It always did." He inclined his head with the exact degree of courtesy owed, and no more. "Lady Vray," he said, "I've come about the northern grazing rights," she said, which was true, and also not the reason anyone in the hall believed her. Fenner was not present for that exchange. She heard of it later, second hand, from a kitchen girl who thought it was gossip, and did not know it was anything else. She filed it away the way she filed away everything that was not, strictly, her business, and went back to the mews. The hawk was flying short distances now, wings strong enough for the length of the enclosure. Fenner stood at the far end each morning with meat in her open palm, and watched it come to her, and did not think about the Lady Vray at all, except that she did, more than she wanted to. Roderick came to the mews less often that week. When he came, he stayed a shorter time, and said less, and she told herself this was sensible. A king with a political complication at his door had no time to spend crouched in straw, and did not examine why the thought sat in her chest like something set down too hard. She saw him once, by accident, through the council chamber's half-open door, 3 days after Isabet's arrival. The lords had gone. He was alone at the long table, still holding a single page of correspondence, and he had not turned it in, she counted, the better part of 2 hours. His shoulders had none of the stillness she had come to associate with him. He looked, in that unwitnessed moment, like a man managing the cost of managing everything, and finding the sum higher than he had budgeted for. She did not go in. She did not let him know she had seen him. She carried the image with her anyway, into the mews, into the evening, into a moment 2 days later, when she was elbow-deep in feed and thought of nothing else for the length of a held breath. The suppression had held for 19 years. Fenner learned this from the estate's old physician, Corwin, a man who had outlived 3 court appointments, and had stopped pretending to care about hierarchy sometime around the 2nd. She had gone to him for hawk salve, and stayed for an hour, because he was the only person at Winterhold who spoke to her as though her questions were worth a full answer. 19 years since the old king's decree, Corwin said, mixing salve with the unhurried patience of a man who had made the same salve for 40 years, a compound in the water of the eastern wing, meant to keep certain bonds from completing where they were inconvenient to the crown. "Whose bond?" she asked. "That," said Corwin, "was never written down where anyone could find it, which is its own kind of answer." She did not understand then why the words settled into her the way they did, cold and specific, the way a fact settles when it is going to matter later, before you know why. She understood better 3 nights after that, when she found the letter. It had been sewn into the lining of her mother's old travelling cloak, which she had kept folded at the bottom of her chest for 19 years without once opening it, because her mother had died before she could explain what it was, and Fenner had decided, at 11 years old, that some things were safer unknown. She found it while looking for a warmer shawl against the deepening cold, and the seam gave beneath her fingers before she had decided whether she wanted it to. The letter was in her mother's hand. It named a compound. It named a decree. It named, in careful physician's language, that Fenner recognized now because of Corwin, a suppression laid on a specific Eastern Wing water source 19 years past, and it named in the same steady hand the child it had been laid to protect. Fenner sat on the floor of the lower quarters for a long time after that, the letter open in her lap for the first time in 19 years, and did not cry, because crying was not, she found, what the moment required. What it required was deciding what to do with a fact too large to carry alone and too dangerous to hand to anyone she was not certain of. She did not go to Roderick first. She went to Corwin, because Corwin already knew half of it, and because she needed to hear, from someone who had no stake in the answer, that she had read the letter correctly. He read it twice. He set it down very carefully, the way a man sets down something that might still be live. "Your mother served the old king's household before Winterhold's," he said slowly. "I did not know that. I did not know she'd carried you out of it." "Carried me where the compound couldn't follow," Fenner said. "For a time," Corwin said. "Compounds fade. 19 years is close to the edge of it fading entirely. Whatever it was built to prevent, it may not be prevented much longer." Fenner understood, in the space of that sentence, 3 things at once: what she was, what the suppression had been built to stop, and what it meant that she had spent 6 years unknowingly cold in the mews each night, while something in her own blood had been quietly failing to be suppressed at all. She thought of Roderick crouched in the straw, watching the hawk take meat from her hand, his jaw tightening at something he could not have named. She thought of the roster, quietly altered, that she had never asked anyone to change. She thought of the way the estate had never quite known what to do with her, the way a door does not know what to do with a key it has not yet been shown. She did not go to him that night either. She sat with it. She let it be true before she let it be spoken. Isabet found her first. Not by accident. Fenner understood that immediately, from the careful, unhurried way the lady arranged herself against the mews doorframe, exactly as Roderick had once stood there, though nothing else about her presence resembled his. "The little bird-keeper," Isabet said, "pleasant as frost. I hear you've become quite a fixture of his mornings." Fenner said nothing, because there was nothing in the sentence that required an answer. "I knew him before you were born to this estate," Isabet went on. "I know what he owes his house, and what his house cannot afford to owe a kennel girl with no name behind her. Whatever you imagine is happening in this mews, I would think carefully before imagining it further." "I imagine a hawk that needs feeding," Fenner said. "I'll ask you to let me get to it." Isabet's smile did not move, but something behind it did. "You should know," she said, almost gently, almost as a kindness, "that Roderick does not know how to want a thing quietly. When he wants something, the whole court learns it within the week. If he has not yet made his wanting of you common knowledge, consider what that tells you about how seriously he means it." She left before Fenner could decide whether that had been cruelty or, worse, an accurate reading of something Fenner had not let herself look at directly. The feral break came 2 days later, in front of the entire council. Isabet had raised, formally, the matter of what she called an irregular presence in the household register. A low-station servant with no recorded lineage, granted access to the Eastern Wing mews adjoining the royal apartments, a security concern given the current delicacy of northern relations. It was procedural. It was civil. It was, everyone in the room understood, aimed entirely at Fenner, without once using her name. "The matter can be resolved simply," Isabet said. reassign her to the outer kennels. It cost the crown nothing. Roderick's stillness, which Fenner had only ever seen from a doorway, broke in front of 30 witnesses. He did not shout. He did not need to. He set down the report he had been holding with a precision that was somehow louder than a slammed fist, and the room went silent around the small, exact sound of parchment meeting wood. "The matter," he said, "will not be resolved by moving her out of my sight, because I have no intention of losing sight of her again." No one in the hall breathed. Isabet's composure, for the first time since her arrival, showed a hairline crack. "She has kept my mews for 6 years without a single bird lost to neglect," Roderick went on. "Healed a hawk with her own hands, rather than wait for a falconer 3 miles distant, and asked this council for nothing in all that time, not even the courtesy of being seen. That ends today, not because of what she may or may not be to the old decree, because of who she already is." It was Corwin, from the back of the chamber, who said what no one else dared. "There is a decree that concerns this, my lord." 19 years old. Roderick's head turned. Something in him, not the man, something older and quieter that lived beneath the man, had gone very still and very loud all at once. He looked at Fenner for a long moment across the width of the council chamber, and she understood, watching him understand, that whatever he had felt in the mews these 3 weeks had just acquired a name he had not been permitted, until now, to know. She told him everything that evening, in the small, firelit study of the council chamber, with Corwin present as witness, and the letter open on the table between them, like the last piece of evidence in a trial that had lasted 19 years. He read it twice, the same way Corwin had. When he set it down, his hand did not quite leave the page. "My father's decree," he said quietly, suppressing a bond he considered inconvenient to a treaty he was still negotiating when he died. "I was 17. I don't think I was ever told whose bond it was meant to prevent." "Mine," Fenner said, "and apparently yours." He looked at her the way he had looked at the hawk the first morning, carefully, as though understanding a wing before deciding what weight it could bear. "I have felt something in that mews for 3 weeks that I did not have a word for," he said. "I have moved your rotation without telling you why. I have found myself in the East Wing on mornings I had no reason to be there. I told myself it was curiosity." "And now?" she asked. "Now I think my wolf understood before I let myself," he said. "It has been trying to tell me something for 3 weeks, and I have been too well trained at ignoring things that are inconvenient to notice." She did not step toward him. He did not step toward her. But something in the space between them changed weight, the way a room changes when a door that has been jammed for years finally gives. The council's judgment on Isabet's petition 3 days later was not spectacular. It was procedural, the way Roderick had learned, from watching Fenner, that procedure could be a kind of honesty. The petition was struck from the register for want of standing, given the irregularity's clear resolution by royal decree. Isabet's claim on the northern grazing rights was reviewed separately and granted in reduced form, because Roderick was not a man who confused a personal reckoning with a political one, and Fenner had told him plainly that she did not want Isabet ruined, only stopped. Isabet left Winterhold 11 days later with her retinue and her reduced grazing rights, and nothing else. She did not seek out Fenner before she went. She did, on her final morning, pause at the mews door for a moment, watching Fenner feed the hawk, and said only, "He wanted you loudly in the end. I was wrong about that." Then she was gone, and Fenner never saw her again. Winter deepened. The suppression, Corwin confirmed, had fully lifted. Whatever the compound had been holding back for 19 years now moved freely. And Roderick said, the first time he held her hand deliberately, rather than by accident, that it felt like something coming in out of the cold he had not known he was standing in. He kissed her forehead, the way someone keeps a promise, on the evening the council formally struck the last of the old decree from the register, and she let herself, for the first time in 6 years, be held by someone without first checking the room for who was watching. 3 months later, the orchard at Winterhold was white with old snow and pale morning light, and Fenna walked it each dawn with a hawk on her glove and a king beside her, who had learned slowly and specifically that devotion was not a thing you announced. It was a thing you did, a rotation quietly changed, a report read twice, a hand that did not let go when she moved to step back. The letter she had carried unopened for 19 years now hung framed in the mews, beside the ledger where she still recorded which bird had flown well. It was not remarkable any more. The fact of the compound lifted, the fact of what she had always been. It happened now, the way ordinary mornings happen, the hawk taking flight from the highest perch, circling once and coming home. "You never told me why you kept the letter sewn shut for 19 years, Roderick said one such morning, watching the hawk climb into pale sky. "I was afraid of what it would cost me to know," she said. "It turned out to cost me nothing. It only ever cost me time. I changed your rotation before I understood why," he said. "I read that report twice in the council chamber because I couldn't make myself stop thinking about a woman who fed a hawk without gloves." "I know," she said. "Corwin told me. Eventually everyone tells me everything now." He almost smiled, the dry, private kind, the kind that had cost him something, once, to allow himself. "That," he said, "is what happens when you stop being overlooked." The hawk came down from its circle and settled on her glove, wings folding, and for a moment the three of them stood in the cold morning light. Her, him, the bird, and no one was looking through anyone. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was, she thought, watching her breath cloud in the pale sun. Everything. If something you had carried unopened for 19 years turned out to be the truest thing about you, would you have opened it sooner, or were you right to wait until you were ready? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time.